January 13th, 2016. Scott Adams died today. It was a big day. Scott had a huge influence on my thinking in the last decade, and I want to honor his memory a bit tonight. I'm on my current career path and life of copywriting and parenthood. Like the lessons I bring to parenthood. A lot of that comes from Scott. And it's a heartbreaking loss. One thing Scott taught me was systems. I'm sure you've heard this. Systems over goals. So one of my systems has been to learn more about persuasion and motivation and influence, specifically because Scott brought that to my attention is so very important. And then once I started reading the books on his persuasion reading list, which I started persuasionreadinglist.com as a website, just specifically to share the lessons I had learned from the books on the list. Some of those were marketing and advertising, and that just sucked me in that whole direction of marketing and advertising and copywriting and persuasion and direct response, which overlapped a lot with what Scott was trying to teach, or what he did teach. But Scott, I owe you so much. Part of that systems over goals was to learn from people ahead of me, right? And what I learned from that is, in addition to that, is to take risks and just get out there and do something that you might fail at, right? So that's how I started my podcast. That's how I started my website. That's how I started my whole everything. And a really important concept in that is Scott in this book here, how to almost fail at everything. How to fail at almost everything and still win big. He talks about a batting average of, if you get a 200 batting average, which is 20%, or a 350 batting average, 35%, that gets you into the Hall of Fame with the 350 or even the 300. And in marketing, that number might even be lower. You might get a 2% response rate or a 5% response rate. And depending on your industry and your previous whatever, that might be all right, So winning is a system that consists of a lot of losing in the meantime. And honestly, when I first started my podcast and my mailing list about understanding how to influence people to take or make, better choices for their outcomes. Because most people, you got to understand, most people are stuck with the status quo, stuck where they are. And it's not that they're happy, it's that they don't see a different route, or they don't trust that other route. So persuasion and motivation and influence, as I see it, as I like to connect with others and talk about, is for the benefit of the other side of that conversation, right? So one of my regrets, which I shouldn't have, because Scott has a whole song about it. One of my regrets, though, is that with my podcast, well, first I started my website, persuasionreadinglist.com, which was only Scott's list of books to read. And I got, I don't know, a third of the way or halfway through that. But then just my interest in this whole concept, and especially some of the advertising books, started drawing me in new directions, and that's where I went. But when I started that list in the email list, which is now at goldmine.marketing, check it out. When I started that list, somebody emailed me back and said, "Why don't you just talk to Scott? Just interview Scott. Like, you got other interviews up. Interview Scott." And I never did. And I wish I had, because the way he thought about the world was unique, and we all have something to learn from that, I think. Agree with him, don't agree with him, agree with some of them, whatever it might be. Thinking about the world in a unique way is a rare gift, and he did it day in and day out for a long time, and I really appreciated his impact and his influence on me. And honestly, looking at the outpouring today on a whole lot of people too, a whole lot of, maybe you, probably you, and maybe that guy over there, definitely her. Real quick, I'm going to run through just, I read these books years ago. I've got How to Fail at Almost Everything and Still Win Big. I've got Win Bigly. Cover's over there somewhere. Can't rip that up. And I've got Losers Think. I do not have Reframe Your Brain. I probably should, but I don't. Anyway, I'm just going to page through the books where I've dog-eared. I'm going to read a few. I've already spent 7.5 minutes on my memory, and the whole point was to just, I've only got one dog-ear and Loser Think. I don't know if I stopped or if it was repetitive or what. Oh, but I got some underlines. We'll get through it. All right, real quick. How to Fail at Almost Everything and Still Win Big. I don't know if these are like the best insights. These are just what I highlighted or underlined. I don't know, years ago. Goal-oriented people exist as if in a state of nearly continuous failure they hope will be temporary. You could... Systems versus goal points to a view that is burdened by semantics. I don't know. That's no good. If you do something every day, it's a system. If you're waiting to achieve it someday in the future, it's a goal. For business, Scott says he wanted to produce something that was easy to reproduce in unlimited qualities. I don't want to sell my time, at least not directly, because that model has an upward limit. And I don't want to build my own automobile factory, for example, because cars are not easy to reproduce. I didn't want to do any sort of custom work, such as building homes. I wanted to create, invent, write, or otherwise concoct something widely desired that would be easy to reproduce. Very good business model. But you got to have the personality, or at least the personality of the comic strip in this case, to reproduce it. The main reason I blog is because it energizes me. This book is another example of something that gives me energy. What a person who gets a buzz from should indulge, so long as it doesn't take away from other priorities. Everyone appreciates that I'm in a better mood when I show up. Here's a star, a couple of stars. Imagination is the interface to your attitude. You can literally imagine yourself to higher levels of energy. Will this idea succeed? Probably not. But the idea of it excites me and raises my energy today. And that's my system. Oh, that's so good. Another star. I should just look for the stars. Free yourself from the shackles of oppressive reality. What's real to you is what you imagine and what you feel. If you manage your illusions wisely, you might get what you want, but you won't necessarily understand why it worked. That's something that I took away from Scott, is to not be so certain about the way the world works, or about the way I work, or you work, or our brains work. He gave the example that stands out the most to me was his worst, I think, example. He was on a podcast and he said, I might call you on the phone and have a conversation, and I'm a normal person, but you're a beaver. But we're still having the same conversation, and it makes sense to both of us. I was like, what does that mean? The beaver thing. It stood out to me because it was, I thought, a really poor example, but visual, about how we might understand the world in completely different ways. And if you saw the whiteboard that Scott did about how the interface to reality, that reality is subjective, and the false because, or the fake because idea comes from Robert Cialdini, his book Influence. There's a study done that Cialdini references, I don't think he actually did it, where people get in line at a copy machine and they say, can I jump in line ahead of you because, and any reason they gave for a because was a higher than usual acceptance. Yeah, sure, of course. Because my shoelace is untied. That wasn't one, but just the word because, right? And Scott's interface to reality whiteboard clip, pod video, whatever, said, people have reasons because, and it doesn't have to be a valid reason or a real reason, but it's I don't know if he said this, but the idea is that it's an emotionally, for them, resonant reason. And you just have to have a because, and that's why somebody believes something. Why do you think that way? Why do you believe that? Because. As long as you have a because. All right, here's another star in the book. The point, I don't know where we're at right now, but the math of success. The point is that while we all think we know the odds in life, there's a good chance you have some blind spots. Finding those blind spots is a big deal. The best way to increase your odds of success in a way that might look like luck to others is to systematically become good, but not amazing, at the types of skills that work together and are highly useful for just about any job. Talent stacking. Yep. Let's find another star. It's a good idea to make psychology your lifelong study. Most of what you need to know as a regular citizen can be gleaned from the internet. And then he has got 2 pages of different cognitive biases. Oh, that's my kid. That's worth reading about. Oh, gosh. 2 more pages of cognitive biases worth reading about. If you believe people use reason for important decisions in life, you will go through life feeling confused and frustrated that others have bad reasoning skills. Predictably, everything we learned about the car after a point seemed to I'm jumping around the underlines, but they didn't match up. I do think a working knowledge of psychology is essential to your success. Over time, it starts to feel like a superpower that allows you to understand things that confuse and confound those around you. Yeah. Superpower that Alienates. The person who wants to talk about something interesting and to sound knowledgeable, your job is to make it easy. Nothing is easier than letting them talk about themselves. Right? That's a Carnegie thing. Hopefully, most people misuse the word hopefully. It's bad grammar to say hopefully she will bring a dessert. Hopefully should be an adverb. Instead, we say we waited hopefully for dessert. I'm not going to worry about grammar, but that is loud. That's funny. Oh, there's a whole section here on persuasion, page 134 on the paperback. Probably read that more than a few times. Look for patterns, food and exercise, how to make healthy food choices, know why you're eating. He starts the, what do you call it, the introduction, saying this is not a self-help book. Okay. It's one of the best I've read. It's not motivational and persuasive like Think Big, for example. Not Think Bigly, but Think Big, or The Magic of Thinking Big, rather, by I don't know. It's over that. I can't think of it. Oh, now it's gonna bug me, but I don't have time to waste. All right. Anyway, it's not quite in that level. It's in a whole new level. It's a better level than The Magic of Thinking Big. All right, Win Bigly. Let's check this out. What have I got? I got a whole lot more bookmark dog-eared here, but we're not going to get through them all because, as we saw there, dog ears and stars are not the same thing. Who knows? Persuasion tip number 1. That's the first one of these dog ears. When you identify as part of a group, your opinions tend to be biased towards the group consensus. Ooh, yeah, ism. Isms are tough. Political alignments, once you declare something, tough. Careful there. I read that elsewhere long ago, and it resonated deeply with me. Doesn't mean that those groups can't represent you, but that you shouldn't necessarily follow along with them to their every step. Trump uses intentional wrongness as a persuasion play over and over to good effect. The method goes like this. Make a claim that is directionally accurate, but has big exaggeration or factual error. Wait for people to notice the exaggeration or error and spend endless hours talking about how wrong it is. And then when you dedicate focus and energy to an idea, you will remember. And the last things that have the most mental impact will irrationally seem as though they are high in priority, even if they're not. High in priority by high mental impact. Copywriting tip. Specific numbers is what I have written here in the border of the notes, the edge notes. All right. Let's page forward. I got, seriously, the intro to this book has far more dog ears. Let's flip through because the dog ears aren't showing me stars. Here's a star. Some forms of persuasion are stronger than others. Here, I am talking about the broad categories of persuasion and not the specific tools. Below, I rank for you the broad forms of persuasion used by the relative power. The strongest are at the top. Notice that the emotional topics near the top are stronger than the more rational ones under the bottom. This is based entirely on my own experience as a persuader. He goes into this here, how to win big. Experience is one of the, I should probably tap that real quick. Experience is one of the 6 ways we can filter reality, and you know what? It's often incorrect, just as the other 6 are. Let's see if we can find it. Where to go? Oh, here we go. 6 personal filters for truth. Number 1, personal experience, human perspectives. Oh, and then it's the opposite. They're false, right? Number 1, personal experience. The fault, human perceptions are iffy. Number 2, experience of the people you know. The fault, even more unreliable. Number 3, experts. The fault, they work for money, not truth. Number 4, scientific studies. The fault, correlation is not causation. Number 5, common sense. The fault is that a good way to be mistaken It's a good way to be mistaken with complete confidence. And number 6, pattern recognition. But the fault is that patterns, coincidences, and personal biases look alike. He also says elsewhere that humans are terrible at pattern recognition. What we think is a pattern is just minor data points in a world full of just randomness and craziness. And that's like one of his biggest takeaways that people still fail to understand. Okay. Persuasion stack. Back to Win Bigly. Visual persuasion is stronger than oral persuasion, and most of the persuasion stack can be communicated either way. But in practical terms, that means a visual presentation of weaker forms of persuasion could be stronger than written or oral presentations of something strong higher in the stack. Whatever. Let's find a couple more stars. I mean, maybe I didn't star this book. You know, as you read different ways, you have different ways to highlight what he looks like something. Whatever. Because I read these years apart. I don't know. Okay, you know what? Oh, this is real to life. My kid will trot out the fairness argument at every opportunity. Life isn't fair. End of story. The point is to go to a high ground where there is no disagreement. The high ground maneuver, Scott taught us, is that you both agree on a bigger concept. Seems like a good way to end it. Scott Adams, thank you so much for your wisdom. Viewer, I'm sure you were disappointed because I didn't have everything like nailed down for you and all that, but let's both agree that the world is full of amazing ideas, and if we can learn to absorb them, investigate them, and grow from them, that life will be better. Scott, simultaneous sip. You stopped drinking years ago. You might get me yet, but right now,